right, let's call the March 8th regular town council meeting to order. Mayor Mark Sukup.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rick Collins.
Here.
Councilmember Aaron Pearson.
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
Councilmember Brett Hansen.
Here. Any amendments to the agenda? Anybody? Public comment? Okay. Consent agenda is comprised of the two, our check register and last minutes. Any comments or questions? Could I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Reports, council reports? Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I'd like to take a minute to talk about last night. They had State of the Town, and the mayor and Brett and Lisa each took a portion of the presentation. We had probably 25, 30 citizens here, which is fantastic, a great turnout. Hopefully a lot listened to it. It was an excellent job. I think it's very worthwhile and very increases the visibility of a lot of things happening, and people don't even understand or see it because they're busy with their own lives. But they talked about the safety and what's going on with the police force going to 24/7 and the building that's going up. They talked about what was happening in the parks and all the great things that have been done over at the reservoir. Lisa spoke about the community events that are starting to revive themselves after a COVID bout, and hopefully it'll continue to go on. But I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the mayor and Brett and Lisa for doing an excellent job putting it forward.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Any other comments? Yes, Lisa.
I apologize if you were going to say anything, but I just wanted to
was-
let people know that the town election is coming up, and keep your eyes open for the ballots, which will be mailed next week. And election day is April 5th. There'll be a candidate forum tomorrow night with 3 candidates. And just wanted people to kind of know that that was going on as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Good comments. Anybody else? Okay. Resolution number 11, series 2022, a resolution approving changes to the Timnath town policy regarding Timnath Reservoir. And Matt, please hit the highlights. I saw the stuff is very, very good internal report, and appreciate it, and tell us what you think are important.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I do want to point out that we met with the pros committee on February 2nd, and our chairperson, Aaron Pearson, headed that committee. Very good discussion, lots of good feedback. Staff brought forward several items that are in the packet, and I'll just go through those 4 items that are the key recommendations from the pros committee. And they are, some of these, they help for both motorized boating and non-motorized boating, and just the general resident use at the reservoir. So we're actually making life a little bit better for all the users out there, in our opinion. And that's the recommendation that came from the pros committee as well. So the change, first change is actually the about the time, the hours of usage. And the real big change here is actually the motorized boating actually can go until 8:30 p.m. And then and we're actually going to then add in Sundays, all Sundays. So it's not the 1st and 3rd and 5th Sunday, it's all Sundays or motorized boat days now, based on the needs, we had a survey, or not survey, but we had a lot of stats that we collected this past year, and it pointed to motorized boating as one of the higher user groups, and we wanted to at least accommodate those folks by giving them a little more opportunities to use the reservoir. So that's 1 and 2. Third change is that as you remember, we changed the limits on the non-motorized permits up to 650 last year. And we got that, we actually captured everybody, but it's just such a high number that it seems like it was it was kind of irrelevant actually when you looked at it. So we decided unlimited and non-motorized boats permits. And that takes a lot of stress off people. They're stress off the website, stress off the staff, and stress off the users because they feel panicky to try to get one of those permits. And so this gives us a little more leeway, and there's no downside because we never saw a crush of non-motorized boats out there where it was unmanageable, even with the 650. So that was the third change. And then the fourth change is related to guests. The guest management was very challenging. It was after the fourth guest, you get to the fifth guest and you start charging people per guest. And it got a little heated at times out at the reservoir unnecessarily. So we moved away from that to go to you get 2 permit tags that are, when you get a resident permit, you get 1 for 2 vehicles. And then you get a hang tag that's a guest hang tag that you can give out to a guest that you want to come in, and that vehicle gets in. And then the next vehicle after that, if you have another one, they'd get charged $8 if you're a resident, $10 if you're a GMA resident. So it makes that a lot less contentious, and it's based on cars, which is the real thing. That's the challenge out there, is parking spaces. So instead of tagging each individual, we're kind of broadening that out a little bit. So those were the real key changes. We had a lot of lengthy discussion about other topics that went back and forth, but these ones were the key things that we want to bring forward. And you see in the packet, there's a red line version and a clean version. Red line version shows lots of little tweaks here and there, but nothing.
And I'd like to interject. Thanks for putting the red line. I love red lines and seeing how it goes. And that really helped
Great.
me read it. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Yeah, because there you see lots of little things, but they're kind of behind the scenes. And if you see the staff report that just summarizes everything, you don't get to see all that behind the scenes stuff. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them, but that's all I have.
Okay. Anybody have Lisa?
I have a question related to the time changes. I know it went from, it used to be dawn to dusk, and now there are set hours. Is that related to staffing, or what was the reasoning behind changing that piece?
So somewhat to staffing. We did want to have really hard lines, because the challenge is well, when's dusk? And everybody's it's a constant moving thing. So we tried to say, okay, here's dusk, here's the time. And then if dusk happens before that, then it starts to ratchet it down, earlier than that. But otherwise
I guess my one concern with that is it doesn't match up to the boating hours. And so if you had a group and some people were out on the boat and some people are on the shore, the people who are on the shore might have to leave before the boat because of the time difference. Because it says, let's say they go out the weekend before Memorial Day, shore hours end at 7 p.m.
Yep.
But they can be on the boat till 8:30.
No, actually they would be cut off at 7 p.m. as well. The boaters would as well.
Okay, so the boating hours aren't actually year-round till it's also related to the shore hours?
It defaults, and maybe that's a good clarification. It would default to those same hours as would be off season.
Okay.
So the season from Memorial Day to Labor Day basically is the longer hours.
Okay,
The season on either end, the shoulder seasons
okay.
is 7 to 7, and that's the limitation.
Because 7 just seemed a little early. I'm thinking like May-ish kind of thing where, starting next week, it's going to be light till 7 o'clock already here. So that would be my only thing with that, is I think it's a little bit early for people who might want to be there when it's not super hot out. Other than that, I very much appreciate the whole changing the number based on number of people, because I know that was something I was concerned about last year, was if a family of 5 or 6 wants to go and things like that. So I very much appreciate that that change on there as well. So my only thing would be that time is dawn to dusk just seems easier, to let people know, but.
And we could move the.
It's not a huge deal to me. It just seemed a little bit early for certain times of the year. I don't go out there very often though, so I also don't know if there are actually people and whether it will be an issue. So
It's generally not before Memorial Day, but I can see what you're saying. If there's a couple of weekends there before that are nice, that it could potentially be a little bit of a problem. So we could build in, we could move something there to say dusk as well. I just get a little word. I like this. I like having a set time. So then everybody knows like, okay, here's
Yeah.
the
You're
time.
out of here.
Dust spreads over a half hour, and I
Yeah.
feel sorry for the poor attendant that's
Yeah,
going to
they're
have to
like-
throw people out.
well, that's why I asked about the staffing, because if it's a staffing thing,
Yeah.
I very much understand having a set time.
Yep.
I would just maybe suggest maybe have it 8 o'clock, like the month of May, rather than having like the Thursday before. It might just be easier to have like a set date or something like that, maybe.
We can certainly make that change if that's something collectively that you.
I don't know enough about it. If that's good for you, it's good for me. Anybody?
Is there some discretion from Randy out there to be, okay, it's now 7:15. It's a beautiful night. There's a lot of people.
Well, it doesn't say that, but we could maybe build that in, or it is a policy too, so we have some flexibility. It's not like.
Right.
we have
It's
to-
7:00.
Yeah.
Head out. I mean, if it was a beautiful weekend and sun
Yeah.
was going to go down at 7:20, I don't know.
But I'd look to the council to give us guidance on that. So if you feel like if you want to move it back, we can move it back a little bit.
You could look at a deal of putting in there that these are the set hours unless posted differently on site.
Yep.
So by the boat ramp, you can say tonight, just so you'll know, we're going to close by 8 or we're going to close by 7:30.
And that's a
And then you can be
Yeah,
looking at the weather as well.
Yeah.
Does it look like storms are coming in? So just put something about, here's the set hours, but we might have posted differently at this.
Yeah, that'd be a perfect way to handle it.
I like
That'd give us the broader
Mhm.
flexibility, but at least establish the baseline and then we can go.
I see a lot of heads not
Yeah.
there, so.
That's great.
Rick, did you have, I thought you had a comment.
No, that's
Oh,
what I was.
I'm sorry.
The only other
Aaron.
comment I wanted to make, obviously, I helped to craft these, so, but Randy was there on the call with us that day. So it was great to have his input, and I appreciated his time that night, because that was a couple-hour meeting, and so it was great to have his input and his observations. I think with that and the pros committee, we really were able to develop a common sense solutions.
Perfect.
And we didn't agree on anything that Randy didn't agree with, so.
Excuse me. Brett?
I'll just comment that I really like the philosophy I'm hearing behind all these regulations. It's to facilitate use of the reservoir and not so much to try and control it or show power over it or anything. It's just to facilitate people's use of it. And I do really appreciate staff's effort. I can tell there's a lot of effort put into compile this data. And I'm glad we're basing our rules off of good information and good data there. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right. If I can quit coughing, we can call them a vote. Resolution number 11, Series 2022, a resolution approving changes to the Timnath Town policy regarding Timnath Reservoir. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved as amended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. All right.
Thank you.
Geez, I'm sorry, everybody. Next, the next and last item we have is a discussion. And we budget, just sort of a background, we budget $1 million for improvements to the community. Sorry, people.
Let me take over for the mayor at this point. He's got time. He's got fighting an asthma attack. The next discussion item is just for discussion only. It deals with the community park survey results and how we spend the money that's already been budgeted for 2022, it's my understanding. So we'll turn that over to staff to start talking about that.
That's correct.
And you did a great presentation here. And again, sort of give us the high points of what you want us and then we'll banner it around and talk about where we want to end up going.
Perfect. I think the point that you were trying to make was that currently in the capital improvement plan, we have $1 million allocated for this project this year. So
Thank you.
what we wanted to talk about was just kind of a quick overview on the survey results. I've got a number of PDFs here for us to kind of just quickly breeze through. The first one I wanted to talk about was the kind of the ranking of those survey results. So we did a ranking with the highest ranking votes. Now, one thing about the survey was that we didn't ask for, do you like this or do you not like this? It was a question of how important it was. So it's not that a 5 was that I don't want this. It's a 5 that it was not important to me. But what I've kind of indicated is a line here showing our top 4 vote getters. So that's the splash pad, the average 2.67 or 2.69, excuse me, the basketball courts, pickleball courts, and tennis courts. So those all kind of hovered above the 3-point line. And then kind of there was those kind of are clustered, well, really the splash pad was at the top, those next 3 were clustered together, and then there was a little bit of a gap between the rest of the results there. The other thing I wanted to point out in the survey results was that we did get very good participation from our neighborhoods. Obviously, the location of this park would indicate to me that we would get a great response from Timnath Ranch and Timnath South. So you can see them as the blue and the gold here. But really, all of our other neighborhoods across town were represented as well. So I thought that was nice to see a sampling of kind of results through the rest of the town. Are there any other questions about the results kind of in their details? I mean, all this was kind of in the packet. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the approved master plan. So this is the conceptual master plan that was approved in 2016 when we were beginning the construction of the first phase of the community park. The main reason I wanted to look at this is, and I've highlighted the 3 areas that we're continuing to work on in red here. So originally we had programmed 2 tennis courts on the north piece, 2 basketball courts and a pavilion on the south piece. And then in the triangle that's adjacent to the existing playground was the splash pad. So one thing that I wanted to mention is that we had a lot of amenities listed in that survey, but we didn't really always plan to have a lot of amenities kind of crammed into these and I would call it the front door of the park because it's right adjacent to Summerfields. And then right on the other side of Summerfields is a bunch of existing residential. So I think there is some sensitivity to how intense we program those remaining areas. Are there any questions on the master plan as we went through it, or anything so far? I'm going to just move pretty quickly, and I'm going to rely on you guys to ask questions if you have anything. Seeing none there, I'm going to move on. So the top vote getter was the splash pad. So we did do a couple of concepts with the splash pad. So we did kind of a basic splash pad. And so this is carved into that triangle space. You'll notice that the orientation of this triangle is a little bit different than what you saw in the master plan. The master plan really was a guiding document. So the spaces that were identified there are generally the spaces that are in the park, but all of the kind of arrangement and walks and all those specific things got changed as we moved from that really conceptual plan through actual design. So this one is kind of, so on all 3 concepts, we've kind of separated out kind of a low splash area from a high splash area with a walk through there. Just at the bottom left corner here is the bridge that crosses to Summerfield. So there's a main thoroughfare there that comes across the bridge and then into the playground. And we wanted to make sure that we were protecting that so that you could get through the splash pad without getting wet if that was your desire. As a parent, I have had my kids run into the splash pad, and I didn't necessarily want to follow them into the splash pad. And then they're out the other side into something else. And, you know, it's either I have to go like all the way around this, or I got to like just dart through and try to get at least as wet as possible. So this is kind of with the parents in mind a little bit. The low splash area is kind of geared more towards younger kids who don't want that unexpected surprise. So what we're proposing here is called the Cascade Rainforest. There's several other amenities that are similar to this, but it's an interactive play feature that has water running through it. There's 2 points of access, and then they dip out of those tulips, or they pour out of those tulips. So there's a little bit of splash there, but then you kind of manipulate the rest of these pieces and play with the water as it's kind of moving through the course. So that's low splash. That's kind of very predictable. Where there is water, it's always flowing. So it's kind of, you know, you're not going to get this unawares that I'm actually standing on top of a jet that's going to come on that you didn't know about. So the converse of that obviously is the higher splash area, which we've got on the south side of the no splash zone. So we've got a couple of these aqua domes, which are bubblers kind of that create this, you can actually get inside of them and be, well, not dry because you went through the water, but protected from the water and kind of like viewing the outside world through that sheen. So 3 of those that would be on 3 different randomized timers. There is the bucket trio, which kind of has these buckets that get filled and then tip, and they tip kind of at different intervals. So again, we're trying to kind of create this spontaneity. And then the splash, the water tunnel, which kind of has jets that come on and off, and you're kind of running through those. I think that if we go with these elements, we probably will push them together a little bit closer and reduce the amount of concrete and get a little bit more landscape in there. I think one of the things that we've looked at when we visited some splash pads and looked at other splash pads is really some of the interaction between the elements. So it's not like you're in this space and then you're in this space, but some overlap there is very nice because it kind of creates a little bit more spontaneity. I'm going to just run through these 3 concepts and then we'll have a little bit of discussion, or if you want to wave me down, that's fine too. Splash Pad concept 2 is similar. We've got a lot of the same elements. On the north side in the low splash, we've introduced this labyrinth, which
So
is,
just like, I want to make sure we're going the way we want to go. I mean, do you guys want to make comments on the design of these things, or just sort of know some basic elements to it? I'm fine with sitting here, but I mean, I'm not going to make any comments on the design, and if nobody else here is, I don't see why we should sit here and listen anymore.
I just had want to discuss the rentable pavilion kind of thing.
Yeah, I want to go through all of that, but he's going to go through 3 more
designs. As far as location
designs.
and that, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't think
It's
we
been
should
done by
have
a
a part
planner
of
that's-
where it is in the park or
Okay.
what, but I do think what we put in and how much we spend is something that I'd like us to discuss at some point. But I do not want to discuss whether we have tipsy cups on the splash pad.
yep. So
But I'm assuming, Brian, that these different designs have different costs associated with them.
that's correct. Yeah. So kind of like 1, 2, and 3 are kind of like running the least expensive, mid ground, and then most expensive. So basically what it is kind of, we keep that same high splash, low splash, no splash area. We just have kind of increased the amount of elements that happen to those. So there's splash pad 2, which we add the.
So while you're on that, so what's the most expensive? What's the least expensive? So we have an idea. Isn't that what you're headed to?
Yeah. I just sort of wanted to see what our money's going to buy.
Sure. So we'll look at the total project costs kind of when we cover the other amenities pieces. So what you're seeing now is a splash pad, like just the actual elements and construction of the splash pad itself.
All right.
There's other costs associated with that we'll cover, but that basic splash pad comes in just north of $400,000, like $401,000. Let me actually. The concept number 2 is about $110,000 more, so that comes in about
Right
510.
side, middle.
And then concept number 3 is about another 120 on top of that, so it tops out at about $630,000.
Okay.
So that's kind of the range that we're looking at.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick.
And there's certain base equipment that scales as you add more elements. You have to add more valves and kind of, so it's not just adding more pieces of equipment, but it's a little bit more infrastructure.
Sure. So we saw 1 and 2. Can we just see a quick picture in 3 just so
Sure,
we
yeah.
see what that, because there you added like the labyrinth and the jet streams. So now you're adding.
Yeah, so we added more jet streams down in the south corner there, and then we've added this other element, the alto, which is again like it's a very low splash but tactile interaction kind of
Okay.
thing. as a kind of aside to that, we have been looking at some of the other splash pads, and there's a limited season for splash pads in Colorado. We're going to get about 3.5 or 4 months out of this. So there is, I think, as we go into the ultimate design, I think there's a benefit of us trying to keep some of these things, like the jet streams have a zero depth footprint is what I'm going to call it. So it's at grade. And then other things have the Cascade Rainforest. So there's elements there that are above ground. I think what we want to do is we want to plan the versatility of this space so that in those other months, if we have, for example, if we have the safety fair out there, there'll be space there that we could set up tents and use that space for other things in those other shoulder seasons. So it's not something for you guys to really kind of just know that we're thinking about that as we're kind of moving through the design process to try to make that a multiple use piece. Any other questions on the splash pads?
No.
Okay, let's move to
I had a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, a question regarding, is there going to be seating around this thing? So you have,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, so in these landscape areas, we'll have either benches tucked into them or seating boulders, preferably outside of the splash areas. Yeah, and then we'll incorporate like the trees with those so that we can get some shade on those benches. I mean, yeah, we want cool places for the parents to sit while the kids are. Yes, the parents. Grandparents, yes.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Lisa.
I'm assuming that since these are just concepts at this point, that we could pick and choose and do something that maybe portions of certain ones and, like just looking at the cost, the oak tree, for example, was a little bit pricey. So we could cut out perhaps, I'm not saying we have to cut that one out, but like we could cut something out, but then replace it with something of lower cost or, like the jet streams. Every time I've been to a splash pad, the jet stream things are always one of the most popular items in there kind of thing.
And so let me make quick.
Mhm.
So that's the purpose of this, is to make those discussions and give that feedback to
Okay, are we
staff.
going
It's
into that
exactly
detail?
what you were saying.
Okay.
So, once what I hear, if this is okay with everybody, is let Brian finish up his tennis courts, pickleball, whatever that he has. And then we discuss what we want in there. Obviously, we can't put 12 tennis courts or 3 pickleball courts or whatever it is. And so,
6.
excuse me. And so that's what the idea is.
Yes. But definitely, I think, yeah. So moving on to the courts.
Just the random.
So this is the, okay, so again, similar to the splash pad, we've kind of developed a number of concepts that kind of work from lowest to highest in cost. So this first one, so what we're really trying to look at is, here's our top 4 elements. So that was the splash pad, tennis, pickleball, and basketball. So what we've got is one concept here where we're not actually disturbing the north area at all. That can be, we could phase that for something additionally in the future, or, however we want, but we wanted to show kind of a compact footprint. So this includes 1 tennis court, 2 pickleball courts. Obviously there would be some fencing that's not shown here, like dividing the tennis courts and the pickleball courts, and then a basketball court on there. So that combined with the splash pad gets kind of our top 4. The next concept has spread those elements out a little bit, which would allow for some future expansion of that. So if we wanted to pair up a second basketball court in the future, there would be space adjacent to the first basketball court. Similarly, if we wanted to add, if we wanted to reconfigure this so that we had space for, we could put 1 tennis court there with empty space next to it for expansion of a second, and move those pickleball courts down to the south. There's that ability. So we want to show a concept that has some phasing available to it. Then we have another concept that kind of increases some of those numbers. So this shows 6 pickleball court, tennis complex on the north side, 2 tennis courts, and then a basketball court. So again, we're sticking with those top 4 elements, but we're kind of playing with them a little bit in the numbers. And then we did do a concept that kind of like is the kitchen sink. There's actually more things there's more things in this that I don't like than I like. I mean, I think we wanted to go through an exercise showing that it could fit. However, I don't think we're doing justice to anything. I think this is kind of like, you know, you've got like this little platter of everything, and it's not a great space for any one of these real amenities. So, but we wanted to just see if that was a possibility there.
So Brian, here's what I'd like you to end at is, can you give us sort of a concept of what we get for $1 million, and using the 4 top choices there,
Yes.
what we would get, and then we can talk from there.
And I know you're going to be surprised about this, but I have built a spreadsheet so that we can add these things in and it will total up our prices for us. So in just anticipation that we might go through some other options. So let me go to concept 1 in the community park. So that was with all the equipment down at the south. So that's 1 tennis court, and you can see these outlined here. I can make this. How does that look on your guys' screen? Is that
Great.
Is that legible? Okay. So we've got 1 basketball court, 2 pickleball courts, and 1 tennis court. And what we're doing here is we're doing a little bit of addition and subtraction. So there's a remainder space after we program those courts, which ends up being the landscaped area. So in this one, we're not touching that north pod at all. So we're only landscaping the remaining space around the south one. So those courts by themselves come in at about $240,000. We're landscaping about 13,000 square feet at $4 a square foot, which is about another $52,000. We've got some site work that's going to happen there, and some amenities and furnishings. So that's we got to clear all.
Can you scroll down? We can read it.
Yep,
Just scroll down and let's see.
I'll scroll down to the very
Thank
bottom
you.
number. So the very bottom number there is $1,040,000 essentially. So that's the basic splash pad paired with the basic elements on the south side of the park. So those 2 together kind of get us to our base number. So then we looked at what concept 2 would be. Again, we've included just the base number for the splash pad. So adding those additional spaces. So we added an additional.
Sorry, Brian, I know this is another 160,000, but what are you doing?
So this is the same programming, but we're now disturbing both the north and south pods.
I
So
got it.
It increases the amount of restoration landscape we need to do. So we're basically buying the same program elements, but we're paying more. So we were doing about 13,000 square feet of landscaping in that one. We're doing 37,000 square feet of landscaping in this one.
And why would we have to do that?
And that it's just the difference between the picture's worth 1,000.
Yeah, that's
here.
fine.
So that's the difference between this concept where we're not touching the north pod at all,
Right.
and this concept where we're disturbing both areas. The benefit of this is that we have the ability to expand
Got
some
it.
of these amenities
Okay,
into the
thank
future.
you.
And then we did look at concept 3 as well. So that had the 6 pickleball courts, 2 tennis courts, and basketball court. So we're starting with the same amount of space. So since we're adding more courts, the landscaping number's coming down. So that comes in at about $1.4 million. So that's every. Oh yeah, of the.
And this is using, oh, you're just talking about the courts? What about the splash?
No, and it's the base model splash pad
Okay.
is included in that. In all 3 of those total project costs, I'll call them, the base splash pad is included.
Okay, got it. So how about if we open it up here then? Thanks,
I've
Brian.
used all my words.
Obviously, we'll ask questions. So comments, anybody?
Yeah, I've got it.
Lisa, I know you can't wait.
I guess there's no big surprise that I'm not a big splash pad fan. I've made that incredibly clear to all of you. And at $500,000, it doesn't thrill me. The main reason being, there's already a lot of elements for young children in that park. And adding a splash pad that can be used for 3 months out of the year, it just does not seem like a great use of our money. I would much rather see these pickleball courts, these 6 pickleball courts go in, because then at least kids that are older than 8 years old that are going to go to a splash pad have something to do. And I know that the skate park isn't going to happen in this version, but I hope that will be revisited in a future time. But I think then we should at least be doing something that to give an opportunity for kids. And the thing I know about pickleball, you go up there to Harmony, those things are packed all day long. Even there was a freezing cold day. I went up to the gym and there were still a bunch of people out on pickleball courts.
Has
So
Phil been brainwashing you?
what's that?
Has Phil been
Yes,
brainwashing
Phil
you?
has been brainwashing me. But I'm just trying to look out for all the other citizens that are over the age of 8. So I think that spending more money in the pickleball courts and, the tennis courts, basketball, whatever, I think is a very high priority. And I would probably agree that the pros committee would agree that having elements for older people is important. I know that we came to that conclusion.
In one of the, I'm just to that point, like when we talked about the survey with them early, before we released the survey, the one thing they really wanted to make sure was that we were putting those age ranges in there, because they did have that concern about, as children are aging out of the playground time, there's just not a lot of other elements there that are not, you don't need to actively program, we don't have fields out there that we're running soccer games on yet.
So I guess other than that, that's really where I come from. But I do feel if we're going to do this stuff, I know that our budget's $1 million, but I think that there could be more money found to make these elements as good as they could. If we're going to do it, let's do it right.
Aaron, I'm going to make my comments now and go. I always take last. I'll go second this time. Aaron, I agree with you 100%. I mean, it just pains me to think about putting that much money into a splash pad. The only the trouble I have with that is we asked it on a survey, and to then not do what the survey comes back, I think we're being disingenuous. And I know you're not at all. I mean, you're thinking it through of here's what I think. And quite frankly, I agree with every single comment you made, but I got to vote for the splash pad.
And I'm not saying not to have the splash pad. I'm against it, but obviously the town is not. So, and these budget numbers are in here, but I guess what I'm trying to say without really saying it, but now I will say it, is that number of the 1.4 to be able to get these nice elements for the older people and then have the basic splash pad. I would be in agreement with that if other people saw it that way. Mm-hmm. But I would hate to then say, okay, we have $1 million. We have this great splash pad and here's your one pickleball court and your one little basketball court.
I agree with you. Go, Brett.
I did check with Lisa prior to the meeting. I asked her what the impact would be if we were to bump this up to $1.5 million. Would this impact any of our other park projects, any other type of project? And I don't want to speak for you, so if you have something you would like to add or change when I say, but basically her report to me was that it wouldn't impact at all any other projects. We could put $500,000 from park impact fees. It wouldn't affect our unrestricted funds. My feeling on these elements is yeah, let's focus on the top 4. The splash pad, I personally voted a little bit lower myself on the survey, and I have kids that are at that young age, but we definitely something the community wants. Because of that, I don't think we should do necessarily the base model because it is something that was very clearly the favorite. And with $1.5 million, I think we can also make sure we have at least a basketball court. I like to see at least 2 tennis areas. And at least 4 pickleball courts. I don't know as well if the tennis courts can have pickleball striping on them. That's something I've heard of. I'm not familiar with pickleball. I'll need lessons from if there's anyone in the audience that knows a lot about pickleball. But those are just my general feelings. Is I'd be okay with going up to $1.5 million and having those numbers of courts and having the splash pad be a decent splash pad.
Lisa?
I was going to actually mention that I know we have restricted funds that are designated specifically for parks and things like that. So I would agree with what Brett says. I did not talk to anyone who's in this room about pickleball before this meeting. But I know I drive by the ones at Twin Silo pretty often, and they are always crowded. And so I think if we're going to do it, I think we need to have multiple courts available. So I would also be okay increasing that budget a little bit if we needed to include the number of courts we were wanting, but to also include the splash pad. My children are not of that age, though. I would guess on a hot summer day, if they were at the park, they would absolutely go into the splash pad. Teenagers, I think, would go through that splash pad, on those hot summer days. So I think it would definitely get used. And so I wouldn't want to necessarily skimp on something, just because, we do have those restricted funds that we could plug into. And when we put the budget, we didn't have numbers or, specifics of what we wanted when we put that money aside for this budget. So, but I definitely think, I would say the 6 court sounds like a great number.
Looking at compromise. Your splash pad, I think what you're talking about is an amusement ride splash pad. What I'm talking about is one that would fit probably in the center of this room with 6 or 7 randomly shooting water things where people could go up and go into it if they want. The kid doesn't care if there's only 3 of them, kind of deal. Then you can shut it off somewhere when you want it on and turn it on when you want it on, off kind of deal, just on and off. The other thing I was going to mention, I think pickleball is the big deal now. These crazies up in our neighborhood are down there shoveling snow off of it so they can get back on it. I also, when I look at this, I see the rentable pavilion is below the line, but I would challenge you to say, maybe we need to look at that. And if we're going to pour this amount of concrete in these areas, take the savings and at least pour pads for a couple of these things. Because when your family or my family wants to get 25 people or 30 people together, it sure is nice to have 2 or 3 trees and a pavilion they could set all their food in, kind of deal. I think it's going to get used, and I think it'd be used more than some of this other stuff. I would just downsize the splash pad and upsize the pickleball and visit, is there a way to do the pavilions? Even if you just pour the pads and say, we've designed the pavilion, that's going to be future pavilions. You could put 4 square court things on them if you wanted to for a while, but they're going to get used because people need a place where they can go out during the summer when it's nice in the evening and get a place and set up their barbecue.
I would say we do have a fair amount of business at the existing pavilion that's rentable, so.
Let us stay here for a second. So did you have something more? So I'm going to just go through each of you and you identify what you'd like. I'm going to make notes and then we'll sort of see what we got at the end on it. And so you sort of started it out, Rick, with, you said a downsized splash pad. Go, and then what else did you want?
Yeah, the rentable pavilion site, or try to see if there's a way to save money by doing part of that now even. And I have no problem adding additional funds to this project.
So, but, okay, so tennis courts, how many?
2 and 4 to 6 pickleball.
And basketball?
And if you can't do 6, then you align them in a way, and that's lot where you can add additional on if you want to. You don't take up the whole space and then find yourself where we're going to have to move them somewhere else too.
Basketball?
Basketball's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Lisa?
So I would say, I would agree with Rick on the 4 to 6 pickleball, 2 tennis, a basketball. The splash pad, I would kind of want to probably look at a little bit more as far as the specific cost, because I do think some of those water things that just shoot up are super popular and probably a little bit less expensive than some of the other options. So if we could fill some of that space in with some of those rather than some of those item ones, I think, and space wise, it's level with the ground and things like that. One thing that we didn't touch on today that I have to touch on because I've mentioned before is after reading the comments that people wrote in for the survey, a baseball backstop is something that I think we should definitely look at. I know I've mentioned it multiple times. So I would just like to maybe possibly revisit that option as well to add, because after reading those comments, so many people mentioned baseball. So I would just like to kind of bring that piece up as well. And then since we're talking parks, I would love for us to possibly look into striping or painting some lines or something for next year, possibly, so that if people want to be out there playing soccer or football or something, that they have some way of, when you're teaching little kids, they need to see those lines to know when you're playing, you have to run up to the line or, something like that. But so outside of these items, but still related to the survey, those are some of the things.
Okay, Brett?
I'll just kind of reiterate what I said earlier. I'm fine with the court numbers I mentioned: 1 basketball, 2 tennis, and 4 to 6 pickleball. With a splash pad, with it being the highest by a wide margin, I think it is something that we want to make sure we do right. I'm
Explain right. My right might be different than your right.
Okay. Well, I'm okay with spending some money on it. I'm not saying we need to do the Taj Mahal or something crazy.
I don't care what it is. I'm asking.
Something more.
He gave 3 concepts. Which one would you choose?
More in between 1 and 2, somewhere in that range. So
that's all I wanted.
And yeah, I think I'm good with that.
Okay.
On the courts, I would agree, like that 6 pickleball and the 2 and 1 concept. I like that. I know that they'd get used. I would like the tennis courts to at least have some ability to do pickleball if there was going to be a tournament or something, if at least have some stripes, maybe not the whole shebang, but because I think it's quite expensive to do those convertible ones, but at least keep that in mind as they're developing those, so that then there would be a total of 8 pickleball courts there'd be 12, right? You get 4 per two per tennis court. So yeah, so then it would be 6, 8, 10 tennis courts. So, right?
Pickleball.
Yeah, for our pickleball. So I think that would just be important to keep in mind. As far as the splash pad, I'm voting for the splash pad, but then again, I go back to the idea that if we're going to do it, Timnath is, I feel, just in my experience out there, Timnath is viewed as a community that has higher end standards and higher end amenities. And that's one reason people love coming here. They love the higher end events that we do and those things. So if we're going to do it, we should do it in a manner that would be sort of fitting our town. So I would probably be more in line with option number 2 in the middle, as opposed to just some basic thing. Because then people would use it and would be cool.
Okay, and my 2 bits is, and it looks like we're pretty much in alignment on things. I would not want to overpaint tennis courts. When you do that, it's a different net, it's a different side, it doesn't fit really well painting one over those. And just so you guys know, I ran a tennis facility for 3 years when I was in college. I was a tennis pro for 5 years. So tennis, I understand really well. And I'm glad everybody said 2 rather than 1, because it's almost impossible to really have a couple people come over and play, because if you have 4, you go play 2 singles and you switch and stuff like that. And what I'd encourage too is that we have expansion ability on some of them. As to where you place it, I'd want the ability at some time maybe to have 4 tennis courts. At sometimes maybe have 12 pickleball courts. At some time that we have a 2nd or 3rd basketball court, that we have placed it, and I think there's enough room out there that it gives the opportunity to expand these in it, is my 2 bits. So here, I'm going to summarize now because I heard everybody. and this is real easy, tennis courts, 2. And the only thing I'd like to see, and I think I got nods, is that there's expandability capabilities with that. And pickleball, we kept bouncing 4 to 6. I mean, that is a difference, is 120,000. So we ought to give a direction of either 4 or 6. And everybody said 4 or 6. So I'm going to just go through 4 or 6.
I'm fine with 6.
6.
All right, we're going 6. And then basketball court, we all agreed with 1. What was the other ball court? Let's see. You got tennis, pickle, basketball.
Are we
Yes.
running electrical to any of these sites?
No, so when we went through the master planning process for this park, there was a lot of concern about lights, and we agreed at that point that we wouldn't have any lit fields or courts at this facility. I think that, yeah, so I would say we're not, I mean, I think there will be a little bit of electrical for like a little bit of site lighting and safety lighting, things like that, but not like lit courts.
So here's, I think, the direction, except for one piece. 2 tennis courts, 6 pickleball courts, 1 basketball court, and, baseball. And I think I heard from one of you that there is going to be a baseball court, or baseball field already planned, or backstop already
Yeah,
planned.
There is a
On there.
backstop all the way down at the
Yeah.
south end. There's a drawing
So I
of it
think
on my
we're
desk.
set. We're set. So, so I think we've got that set. I'm going to go back though with splash pad, because we were a little, so in an interest of just direction, you got your choice of 1, 2, or 3 that he mentioned. Brett's 2, you 2.
I actually would rather, none of them, but some combination of all of them, I guess, would be my preference. I think there are low-cost features we could add to, let's say, the number 1 or 2 that would kind of take the place of some of the other things. Like that labyrinth thing totally does not appeal to me. I think like
So you're
maybe
at
some of
1
those,
3/4.
something. D.
Just mid-range.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think, I think almost 2, maybe not
Yep.
quite. And it sounds like, Lisa, you'd like to have some input on the splash pad. So
I
maybe,
think they know what I'm thinking, so I feel like, yeah.
Yeah, we can do some offline stuff to,
so in looking at that, help me here, Brian, it looks like we're at about $1.4 million.
All right, so we got 1 basketball court, we got 6 pickleball courts, we got 2 tennis courts. And then I'm gonna just plug in for the splash pad. Our number 2 was 510. I'm just gonna plug in at 500,000 for the splash pad. It's kind of that almost number 2.
Yeah.
And that brings us to 1.58. Now,
So my thought is, I don't know, I don't care.
well,
1.5 or 1.6. it's
Can
not
I
gonna matter.
just say a couple of things about this? Number 1 is these numbers are based on concept design. So I think we have direction right
Well,
now.
I think what
for-
we got to do is give you a budget and then have you work in it. And you gave us what we need to know basically what that budget is. Then if for some reason you want to change the budget, you come back to us and go with it. So. Pavilion? Actually, I agree with that too.
We're gonna put the mayor's statue.
Rick,
in the
what do you want?
splash pad.
I'm trying to get this meeting done. What would you like, Rick?
1.5.
Okay, so no pavilion.
No, I like the pavilion.
So then you gotta go to
decide
1.6.
what the concrete is.
You got to go to
It's
1.
not 100,000 to put a concrete. No. It was like 50 grand.
It was. Lisa?
1.6.
1.6.
All right, we're saying, we're gonna, so Aaron, that was a discussion, but it also is a resolution on a budget, isn't it?
No, we're just looking for a general guidance. So what we have, you guys jump in, but I think what we have is perfect for what we need. That allows these guys to move forward.
Won't we at some point have to make, I mean, we've only budgeted $1 million, so we're changing the budget.
Yep. And so Lisa.
Lisa, come
Yeah.
here.
She'll prepare a supplemental to that. I'll let her handle it.
You're not on, so either talk louder or click it on. Okay,
It went over budget.
okay. Is everybody happy?
Didn't show where it's from.
All right, we're all happy. All God's children's happy. So,
That's the other one that was brought up. The other one that was brought up was the discussion about putting some lines down this year for flag football.
but I
or
would
for-
think that'd be operation, that'd
Well,
be
no,
our
I
rec.
think didn't we have a rec person in
Yeah,
the
we
budget
do.
at some point? Yeah, a rec person in that, and maybe that's part of that budget, or we could figure out how to do that, because there's some areas out there where that could be done.
There's
Then you'd
huge
have
areas to
fights
do
on which teams would be able to get to use it, but it'd be nice to have a couple laid out. And-
I was thinking they could still share the field just using a couple of the lines. They do it over, even in that, I don't even know who paints it, if it's just individuals that paint it, along Jacoby and Windsor,
Well,
right
I
by
actually have a
Windshire.
suggestion on that.
Okay.
We received a note from the new coach of the Timnath high school football team, and he said he would like his students at some point to have some kind of project. And I know that there's some members in Harmony that every year go out and work, do the field at Eden baseball diamond. Get the turf ready and the dirt in that. They volunteer their time and do that. This might be one we look into it and get the rec guy and some others to say, would you help us? Because they've got the equipment to line their field out there. And once you put those chalk lines down, you don't have to do it every week. Because once the grass starts dying, you just do it once every 2 or 3 weeks kind of deal. And that might be one, because I'm trying to find something that the coach, he said, we want to
That's
be
good.
part of this community.
Callie's looking at stuff for them too, so
Yeah.
no.
So I just throw that out there.
Councilman Collins, if you could share with us the contact information, we'll reach out to the individual.
Yeah.
Kelly has
got
it, Matt.
Oh, Callie does have it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he's, the coach is a resident of Timnath too.
Thank you.
And just as an aside to tack on that, Rick, I'm hoping to be on the parent advisory board for the new high school. So I would be happy to be sort of the liaison between that school and the council, with,
Great.
if they had, needs or we had needs for them. So.
Yeah, we want to be symbiotic with them. Any final comments or questions or anything? Thanks, Brian. Good discussion, everybody. I think we ended up with a good solution. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?